What's up guys, it's Brad from LightArchitect. In this video, I'm going to be sharing how you can create some simple sky replacement inside of Blender simply by using the compositor and some basic 2D tracking. This effect is super simple. Essentially, what we have to do is create a matte for the background and then replace that matte data with the background of our choice, whether that be an image or a video of some sort. Anyways guys, let's get started. Here we are inside of Blender. The first thing we're going to do is just delete everything except for our camera here. So I'll go ahead and select our light and cube and just press X to delete them. And now what I want to do is I want to open up our footage in the motion tracking tab. So I'll just click on the plus button here, go down to visual effects, and then click on motion tracking. And now what I want to do is I want to open up our video file that we're going to use as the example for this tutorial. So I'll go ahead and click on open, and I'll navigate to where I have saved that video footage, and it's just this one right here. So I'll go ahead and open that clip, and this is the clip we're going to be adding our sky replacement to. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be keying out the blue of our sky here and then replacing this background with a new sky element. And as you can see here, if we play through our footage, you can see that we have a bit of a moving shot. So what we need to do first is add some tracking markers so that whatever sky we add to the scene moves with our background. So first I'll go ahead and I will prefetch our frames here, and I will also set the scene frames, and it goes to 324. I think actually I'll end at frame 300. Now what we want to do is track our footage. I'm going to do a simple tripod track for this shot since there's not a lot of parallax in the scene. However, if you wanted to add more 3D elements and not just replace the background, I do have a 3D tracking tutorial as well. So I'll put a link to that in the description below. But for this tutorial, we're just going to add some tracking markers to this building here, and that should work just fine to replace our sky since the building is far enough behind our main character here so that the parallax should be close enough. So I'll go ahead and I'm going to use the blurry footage tracking settings. And now I will just go to the beginning of our scene here. And I think I can probably get away with just selecting a point of contrast here on our building and just track through the shot. And as you can see here, there's not any slipping, so we should be good on that one. And I'll just add a few more points here just for good measure, so we get the rotation of our camera as well. So maybe one right here, track this one. So I'm just tracking forward with this button right here. And I will also maybe one here as well, track that one forward. Oh, that one looks like it's slipping a little bit. Oh no, looks good actually. Maybe we'll do one more and we'll do a little further up here. So we might do something right here. Track this backward. Okay, so that one tracks backward and cool, looks good. But just check for any slipping that the tracks might have, but this looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of our tracks here. I will go to the solve tab here. And for solve, I'm going to select the tripod option, and I will not refine anything here for this specific tutorial since we're not going to be adding any 3D. We're just going to be adding our sky in the compositor. So we'll go ahead and click on solve camera motion. And as you can see here, we have a solve error of 1.38 pixels, which is not super good, however, not terrible either. Let's see if we can get it a little bit lower. So under cleanup, I will clean the tracks, and let's see here. Looks like this one has the most projection error, so I will go ahead and delete this one. And now let's see what happens if we resolve the camera motion. There we go, 0.47 pixels. That's a much better track. This should be pretty good now. Now what I want to do is I want to go to our stabilization tab. Since we're going to be using a 2D stabilization node in our compositing process, we want to go to this tab right here and enable 2D stabilization. And what I want to do is select all of our tracking points here and add them to the tracks for a location. Oh, actually first, we want to select the rotation. And I'm gonna leave scale alone for this tutorial since the parallax should be pretty minimal. But you can select scale if you like, and that data will be applied to your background that we add in the compositor as well. But just this one should be fine for this kind of simple shot. Now what I want to do is I'll select all of our tracking markers here and add them to tracks for a location. And then I will also add them to the rotation scale tracks. And this looks pretty good. Now if we want to check to see how our tracks are doing, what we can do is go here to clip display, and then where is it? Show stable. Go ahead and select that, and we can play through our clip. And we can see if the stabilization is working if we wanted to use this to stabilize our footage. However, instead we're going to be using it to add some sky as the background. I'm getting a little bit of slipping here, which is not good. I'm not sure why that's occurring. I think what the issue is some of our tracks are not occurring throughout our entire scene. So instead of using all these tracks, I'm just going to use these two. So I will go ahead and remove all these here, remove all these as well. And I'll just select these two tracks that are that stay in our shot the entire time, and I'll add those to location and rotation scale. And now I don't think we'll have any issues. All right. There we go. That was the issue. So for 2D stabilization, you just want to add tracks that are included in your entire timeline. So anyways, this is looking pretty good. 2D stabilization is looking just fine. So I'll go ahead and turn off the show stable button here. And now let's get into our compositing process and replace our sky. So I'll go ahead and go to our compositing tab here, and we'll click on use nodes. And we're not going to be using this render layers node, so I'll go ahead and delete that. And we'll go ahead and add a movie clip node. So I'll press Shift A, add an input movie clip, and we'll select our movie clip here. Should automatically come up though. Now I'll press Shift A, we'll add an output viewer, and we'll just add this to our viewer node to see what we're starting out with. And I'm just pressing V to zoom out there. So now this is our starting point. Now what we want to do, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, we want to create a matte for the sky and then use that data to tell Blender where we want to add our sky image or video that we're going to replace it with. So first we're going to create the matte data for our sky here. And there are a variety of ways you can create mattes. In fact, sometimes you have to use multiple mattes to combine together if it's a really tough key, for example, specifically on places like this, like our character's hair here. However, this is a pretty clean blue background, so I think we should be able to get away with just one or two keying nodes, just keying out this blue background. So what I'm going to do is I'll press Shift A, we'll add a matte, and there are a variety of different effects we can use. You can use a difference key, distance key, luminance key works pretty well a lot of the time if you want to create a matte of the bright or dark spots of your image. However, a good all-purpose one is just this basic keying node here. So go ahead and select that and add this right after our movie clip. And now as you can see here, already we have a pretty good key because our background was so bright. However, I don't want our key color to be white. Instead, what I'm going to do, I'll go ahead and reconnect our movie clip to our viewer, and I'm going to select our key color to be our blue sky, because that'll be quite a bit more accurate. Go ahead and select that, and now let's try out our viewer node. Now that might not seem as good. As you can see, we're getting some artifacts. However, I think for our character's hair here, it's gonna be more accurate because having the key color at white was clipping our hair quite a bit here. So rather than losing that data, we're going to try to keep as much as we can without using some more techniques and having to bring that hair back in, for example. So we're gonna try to keep as much detail as we can without making this node tree too complex. So we've added one key here, and there are a variety of different settings you can change. You can change the pre-blur, which changes how the footage is being blurred before it's being keyed. So usually I keep this pretty low, but it does take the edge off some of the artifacts a bit. And I'm not gonna go through all of these. You kind of just have to play with them to get the result that you like. The main two I play around with are the clip black and the clip white level, as well as the screen balance. And then the edge kernel radius and the edge kernel tolerance. That's going to affect your edges of the key, which is going to affect this output right here if you're going to use that. But this should be pretty good. You might also want to feather some things, so you can feather it here and then also blur the key in post as well. You also have some inputs here, which we may use later in this tutorial. Essentially, you can plug in masks to the garbage matte to tell Blender to include certain data in the key, or you can plug it into the core matte to exclude that part of the image from the key. But anyways, let's continue here. I might add a little bit of post blur and just feather a tiny bit. But before we get too far here ahead of ourselves, I want to just add one more keying node here to try to remove this sky. Actually let's try to increase the screen balance here first. Bring it back down to 0. Actually, that helps a lot. And we still have some pretty decent detail in the hair here. So yeah, there we go. So yeah, that's looking a little bit better already. And now what I'm going to do, I'll just go ahead and duplicate this keying node. And while it's not on our node tree here, I will use the keying color, just key out some of this stuff here. And let's see if that gets rid of anything. And while that did remove most of our sky, as you can see here, it removed a lot of our foreground building and character here as well. So we don't want that. However, I think what I can do is just bring back the screen balance, maybe 0.5. Let's see what we have here. Try this out to see if we can get some of the detail of our character here back. There we go. Already we're getting a pretty clean key here. Getting a little bit of blue on our character's hair, but not too bad right now. We might be able to just bring that back with some screen balance, or in fact, what we could do, we don't want to lose too much of her hair here, but we could dilate, erode this a little bit, maybe 1 pixel. There we go. That kind of helped a little bit. Maybe we do that and then also feather our mask a little bit. There we go. Now it's blending in a little nicer. You can see what the feather's doing if I increase it a lot. See, it's just feathering the matte a bit. You can see that now obviously we've done it too much, but just for the sake of this example, in fact, I might just show you what the matte looks like. I see what I've done here. So we need to use this matte as our garbage matte for this keying node. Now everything's coming together. So since we've added 2 keying nodes here, we don't want to use the image output of this keying node, but rather the matte output, and then the image goes into the image here. So now you can see how the matte has been created here. And you can see that white is a value of 1 and black is a value of 0. So this is what we're going to use to tell Blender the sky should be here and this should be our foreground. So we obviously have to clean this up a little bit. So I might just bring the screen balance up to 1 here. See what that does for us. A little bit cleaner. I want to try to get some of this back. So I'm going to make the screen balance for this 1.5. There we go. That's looking a little bit cleaner. I'm going to get rid of our garbage matte for now. We're going to plug that back in, but I just want to see how things are looking with just our image. The key is looking pretty good. I'm seeing some artifacts here. Let's see here. Maybe just duplicate this once more. Try to get rid of some of this stuff here. So plug this, try to key that out. It's probably going to be too much. Actually, that worked pretty well. So just keyed that out over here, that little artifact, and it's looking pretty good. We're having a little bit of an issue here. So what we're gonna do is use a core matte later to make sure that's not included. But this is looking pretty solid. But you can see what we're doing here. We're just putting some keying nodes after each other to try to extract this background as best we can. And this has been a pretty easy one since our background was so blue. But a lot of the times you have to use different mattes and combine them on top of each other. And the node tree can get very complex. But this is looking pretty good. Now what I want to do, I'll go ahead and bring our matte data back to garbage matte and then do the same thing here. And now what we can do is we can use that black and white matte data to drive what part of the image is going to be our background. So what we're going to do, we'll go ahead and press Shift A. I'll add a color alpha over, and I'll plug in our main footage to the top input of this alpha over node. And then what I'll do is I'll connect our matte data to the factor input of this alpha over node. And now I'll connect this image output to our viewer node, and let's see what we get. All right, so our key is not perfect. However, we'll tweak the settings here in a bit to try to clean this up. But you can see what's happening here right now. Our background and foreground are flipped. So I'll go ahead and put this in the bottom input. Now, as you can see here, this is where our background sky is going to be. We'll clean this up here in a bit, but you can tell in concept what's happening here. We're using the matte data to drive the foreground and background through this alpha over node. So let's go ahead and add in our sky movie clip background. So I'll go ahead and press Shift A while our movie clip is selected, and go ahead and close this movie clip and then open up a new one. And I'm just going to open up a video of some clouds that we're going to use as our background. So I'll go ahead and click this here, open it up, and I will add this to our image input here. And there you go. Now, as you can see here, we've replaced the background pretty nicely. You can see we still have that artifacting, but we'll tweak some things here in a second. Let's go ahead and stabilize our background as well. As you can see here, if I go to a different part of our footage, our camera is going to move, but our sky doesn't move with it. So what we need to do is use a stabilize 2D node. So I'll go ahead and press Shift A. We'll go to Distort, Stabilize 2D, add this right here, and we'll select the video that we tracked earlier. And we want to actually invert the track because we stabilized it. We want the opposite effect on our sky so that it's moving in the same way that our footage is moving. So go ahead and select the invert checkbox here. You can see that the sky is being cut off a bit here due to our track. So what we need to do is actually just increase the scale of our sky. So when the sky moves around according to that track, it's not too small of an image to fill up our background. So I'll go ahead and press Shift A. We'll add a distort, transform, add this right before our stabilize 2D node. And then I will just increase the scale a little bit to maybe 1.4. And now, as you can see here, our sky is scaled up. So now that should fill up our screen a bit better as the track moves it around according to our tracking data. All right, so now that we've added the background to our footage here, let's clean up our matte a bit. And then finally, we'll add some light wrap to our character and some color correction to integrate our background sky into the environment a bit better. So first, I'll go ahead and clean up the sky a bit. I didn't expect this difficult of a key, so I'm just gonna try a different process here. I'm gonna go ahead and view our sky here by itself. And what I want to do is kind of key the sky in sections. So a lot of the time when you don't get a really clean key, you'll do things in sections and it'll get really complex. you'll have to roto out and create different garbage mats for things. However, for this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of our keying nodes for this part of the sky, one of our keying nodes for the mid part of the sky, and then one of our keying nodes up here. So you can see that this part of the sky is a little brighter, and then it gets darker as we go further up here. So I'm going to try to key that way and have a little bit more of a process behind it. So I'll go to our first keying node here, select our key color down there, and for the second keying node, I'll select this middle portion of the sky, so a slightly different gradient. And then for this third one, in fact, I might do 4 of them. Let's just go ahead. We'll do this one right here. Then I'll duplicate it once more, put one more, this very top part of the sky when it gets really dark. So now we have a full gradient of colors, and we could of course just adjust one of them, but this should be a little bit better. So go ahead and bring this over here, add this to our viewer node, add our output here. Let's see what we get. We do need to connect our mats back to our garbage mat input of the next node. So go ahead and do that. Oh, this goes to our image actually, and then this goes to our garbage mat. There we go. Now let's connect our mat of our final keying node to our viewer node, and let's see what we get. And there we go. That's a pretty good looking key if you ask me. We're getting a little bit of some errors here, so we're going to use some core mats to make sure this doesn't happen. But over here on the left side, we have a pretty nice looking key on our background. And the main thing we're looking at here, I would say, is the hair itself. So we could adjust some feather settings and some post blur, but I think this is going to look pretty good, and we'll add some light wrap to it and make it even better. Go ahead and get rid of this viewer node, and let's see what our main viewer node is looking like when we use this data to drive our mat output. And actually I need to flip these back here. So we're using the white channel to drive our sky background, and we need to also make sure that we're connecting the mat output to the factor of our alpha overnode. And yeah, that's looking like a pretty good key if you ask me. If we just zoom in here, you can see the hair is not bad. We have a little issue going on over here with our mat data. So we want to create the core mat for each of these keying nodes to get rid of these artifacts in our mat data. So what I'm going to do is I'll open up a new visual effects tab here for masking. Got to go ahead and open up our footage here. And now I'll just add a new mask here, and I'll press Command and click. And I'm just going to make a simple mask around this part of the building here. The main area where we were seeing some of our mat come through was just by these windows here. So I'm just going to draw a little mask around this entire half of the footage here. And then what I'm going to do so this mask is tracked onto our building is I'm just going to select it, and then select one of our tracking markers on our buildings, and then press Ctrl P. And now, as you can see here, if we scroll through our timeline, you can see that our mask is tracked to the side of our building, and now we can use that as an input for our core mat. So go ahead and go back to our compositing tab here, and I will press Shift A. We'll add an input mask, add this guy, make sure to select our mask here. And now what we can do is we can take this mask data, put it into our core mat, and now this part of our image is going to be excluded from this initial keying node, which was causing those artifacts in this area on the bottom right. And I'll go ahead and add a viewer node for our mat so you can see what I'm talking about, that our mat will be much cleaner now that we've done this. And as you can see here, very nice looking mat for our sky replacement. All right, so I'll go ahead and delete that viewer node. Now it's time to add some light wrap for our character here. So essentially what we're going to do is we're going to use our background sky that we've added, and we're going to integrate that into the shot by having it kind of leak over as a soft edge on our character as well as our building. And honestly, for this specific shot, we might not really need it because the sky is pretty similar to the sky in the original shot, aside from the clouds, which make it a little bit more interesting. However, it's a nice touch that you can use to integrate your skies into your shots a bit better if you need it. So I'll go ahead and show you guys how to do that real quick. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use our mat output here and create some data that just represents the edge of our character here as well as this building. So I'll press Shift A, we'll add a filter, dilate erode, and we'll connect our mat data to this. And then I will make this a distance of -1. And then I'll press Shift A again, we'll add a color, mix node, and we'll make this a subtract. we'll connect our mask output from our dilate erode node to the bottom input of our subtract node. And once again, I'll take our matte data and plug it into the bottom portion of our subtract node. So what we're doing here is we're taking our matte data, adding it to a dilate erode node, and subtracting 1 pixel from that, and then taking the difference between our original matte data and the subtracted form. It's a little bit confusing, but I'll go ahead and show you guys on a viewer node output what this is doing. So there you go. Now, as you can see here, we've created some white area around our character, which we can use for light wrap. So now we'll use this data to overlay some of our cloud image on top of our character. So to do that, we'll press Shift A. I'll add another mix node. We'll make it an add node here, and I will take our light wrap data and plug it into the factor of this add node. And then for the bottom input of this add node, we will take our clouds image that's been stabilized here, and we'll plug that in right here, and let's see what we get. And now, as you can see here, our cloudy image has been very subtly overlaid on top of our image. All right, guys, so I had a bit of an error with the light wrap. I was getting the light wrap on the outside edge of our character rather than on the character's edge herself here. So to resolve the issue, what I've done here is I made the distance on our dilate erode node positive. So as you can see here, you can definitely notice the light wrap on our character's edge. And I've also had our matte and our subtract matte data backwards. So we need our matte for our key going into a dilate erode node, then going to a subtract node on the top input, and then our original matte going into the bottom input. And then that data is what's going to drive the add node that's going to overlay our cloud image on the edge of our character here. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing. Sometimes I have to experiment myself a bit as well. I've added a little bit of blur here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that just for the sake of clarity. It's not adding much, but you can see we have some light wrap here. It's a little bit too much in my opinion. So I'm going to actually dial back the distance to maybe 2 pixels. There we go. Now we have some nice light wrap on the edges, and it's pretty subtle. And now for the final touches of our video, I'm just going to give some color correction to our sky replacement background as well as the final image. So go ahead and press Shift A. We'll add a color balance node here. Add this right after our clouds clip. And I'm just going to maybe give it a little bit of a warmer tone, just slightly. I think the exposure of our background image is matching pretty nicely already because it's pretty similar to the exposure of our sky originally in the shot. So this should be pretty good. Let's see if this warmth adds anything. So that adds a little touch of warmth there. Pretty subtle, but there's not a lot we need to do to this shot. I might just duplicate this color balance node right before our viewer node, and also make sure to connect our composite after everything as well. So that's our final output, of course. And I'll just add some basic color correction on this as well. We'll do some tritone colors, making the shadows a little warmer, the midtones a little cooler, and the highlights a little warmer as well. And let's see what we get. That's how you can create some simple sky replacement inside of Blender and track it onto the background of your footage. I hope this video was helpful. As always, feel free to leave a comment if you have any questions or suggestions in the comment section below. Let us know what you'd like to see next on the channel, and I'll see you next time.